Right after we go, we're going
I just kept getting the email, and I was like,
we have 5 minutes. We have, I know a lot of people. I think I've heard it.
She's right here.
It doesn't have a chicken.
Give 2 minutes for picking up the pizza. Then, do we have anybody in the webinar? Do we have anybody joining in the webinar?
You're done.
How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Looks like there's 2 people.
Yeah.
Down the road.
Are the final? That's what I
No, I'm going to read them final version 9 of the final version 9.
How are you doing?
That's final version of the final. Thank you. Do I do something with the other side? No, a lot of people have something about that.
There's a whole one of those every day.
Before we meet,
You gotta give me the recipe for that.
I wish they would read it.
Oh, it smells good. Pepino, cucumber. Ginger. That's really
Yeah. My family was Thanksgiving.
Calling someone to make sure that they're
Yeah, here's the quantity. If you want to make, Two, okay. The whole thing. Oh, the whole thing, yeah. Oh, man. Wow. Ginger, plum, okay. I usually get like, okay. See yours tasting. Okay. One.
I unlocked, the store is unlocked, and that one has my phone number on it, so people are calling.
You can lock the door unless you're
What?
Were you expecting anybody else?
Wow.
I don't want to leave people unlocked. I don't want somebody walking.
outside. On both sides?
Oh, okay, that's perfect. Because I put my mind the wrong way.
Luckily, you didn't aim it properly at
Right.
It is much better.
Yeah, right. I understand this is like the extreme as well.
I'm sure it must be there, Karen and Vince are my technology people. So where's the camera so people can see what's happening?
There's no camera.
Okay.
People can see the screen.
Oh, but there's no camera. So you're safe. Right?
Confetti. I know. What's the confetti?
But,
Can we?
yeah.
Okay.
So, welcome everybody to the South Florida Regional Planning Council. I've been hearing a lot about you and all the work that you're doing. I'm very excited to see what y'all have developed. My name is Isabel Cosillo-Carballo. I'm the Executive Director of the South Florida Regional Planning Council, which you may have heard is a regional public policy and planning agency. Actually, 1969, and our local agreement, which brought us together formally through Monroe, Miami-Dade, and Broward, that was signed in 1974. So we have been here a long time. Our mission is multiple-fold, but basically we're the sweet spot between local agencies and state agencies. So we're the regional agency. And part of what we do is we bring together local partners, including our universities, our private sector partners, public agencies, and we bring people together so we can all talk together about the issues and opportunities facing our region. Okay? So if not, we would be very much working in silos, and that's happened over time. You know, we're an accidental region. We never set out to be a region. We just sort of bumped into each other. And so, you know, now it's important that we're all working together because what happens in one county impacts the other, and all of you, especially because you're all young people and you have a future ahead. So that's very important. The other thing we try to do is make sure that our policy leaders have the information they need to make informed decisions. So the work that you're doing here will be part of that informed decision-making process. We'll make sure to post the work that you've done on our data common and make it available so people can see what y'all are thinking and recommending. And what we try to do also is make sure that our policy thought leaders are thinking about issues, integrating them. So we understand that transportation impacts communities, impacts economic development, impacts housing, all these different things, and trying to think broader about how things fit together. So the economy is important, making sure that we have a strong economy, clean environment, and vibrant communities. That's what's going to lead to greater prosperity. I know that you've had the opportunity to meet members of the council staff before. We have a great team here. We have Ed McGann, our finance director, that is with us today. We also have Vince, who I believe you've met earlier in class.
Remotely, but.
Yes, and Dr. Bolter. Yeah, these are my brain trust millennials. I'm very excited to have them here. And it's, no, you don't understand. I mean, the median age here has to drop, okay? So, and then, of course, you're very fortunate today to have Ishihiro Brown here with us. She is a dynamo and well-respected leader in our region. She's the director of the South Florida Community Development Coalition, which I will let Ishihiro tell you more about that. But this is a woman to know. Liberty, no, but it's true. It's very true. It's true. And so Elaine Black sends her apologies. She very much wanted to be here. Maybe there's an opportunity for her to visit with all of you in the future. She is the director of the Liberty City Trust, and she is dynamic, has been working in Liberty City and with partners across the region for, oh, she might hit me, she more than 2 decades. So, so there you go. So I think it'd be helpful if, at least it'd be helpful to me, if all of you would introduce yourself so I know who you are, where you're from, and how we move forward. Does that sound all right, Dr. Nanafai?
Sure, absolutely. All right.
Hi, thank you for having us. We're very excited to be here. My name is Lilia Silverio. I'm a second year PhD student, part-time student, and I'm also Executive Director of Finance at FIU.
Oh, wonderful. Excellent.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Tramo. I'm also a second year part-time PhD student. I work full-time for City of Sunny Isles Beach as the Cultural and Community Services Department manager.
Oh, that's great. One of our staff members lives in Sunny Isles. She's not here today. I'll let her know we know. We have connections.
Good evening. My name is Ana Maria Diman. I am also a second year PhD student, international student. I come from Romania.
Nice, very nice.
Hi, I'm Patrice Keatsbay, second year PhD student. I've worked with Shakiria
Oh, so
before,
you know she's a rock star.
Yes,
You know
she
it.
is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very happy to be
Testimonial right there.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I'm Pallavi, and I'm also an international student in the second year of my PhD program. My interest is in non-profit and community development.
Very good. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Fullwood. I'm a second year master's student. I'm studying recreation and sports management, and I work for my law course as a recreation specialist.
Oh, great.
Good evening. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Sean Benain, Lorenzo Benain. You can call me Lorenzo or Lolo. I'm a second year PhD student, and I've been looking into performance information education, so part of our presentation is on education tonight. I look forward to getting some feedback.
Excellent.
I'm going to stay seated. Hi.
All right.
Hi, my name is Yvette. I'm actually graduating this semester with my master's. I work at FIU as business analyst for academic advising technology. My name is Crystal. I am also in my last semester as a master's student for public administration, and I work for one of the colleges at FIU.
Wonderful.
I'm Jose Mata, but I go by Jam, and also second year PhD student. And my focus is really going to be on humanitarian assistance, post-disaster issues, especially as it relates to the military.
That's perfect. Would any of you like to say anything? We're good to go. It's showtime. Huh? Shakiri, I think it would be good if they all have your business card.
Didn't bring enough business cards. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Just really briefly, because this is really not even about me today. This is about the final presentations. But as Isabel mentioned, my name is Shakiria Brown. I'm the executive director for the South Florida Community Development Coalition. And we're a nonprofit membership organization focused on expanding affordable housing and economic opportunity in Miami-Dade County. So our basically three areas that we work in includes building capacity of nonprofits, as well as the community development sector, policy research and advocacy, as well as working to facilitate partnerships. And prior to accepting this role or being in this role for the last 2 years, I used to administer federal and state grant programs for several cities in Broward County for 11 years or so. So this was just kind of a shift into getting more involved in policy work. So thank you for the invitation, and looking forward to hearing the presentations today and learning something new.
Great. But let me just preface what we've been doing here. This is all of what you're seeing is a product of the class, which is for class which is titled Local Economic Development. I teach in the Public Administration Department. Most of you also benefit everybody. I look after the PhD program, but also we have very strong master's and undergraduate program. So we have 10 students here who worked on 4 different projects. So essentially you have 4 teams, one coming from business, the second coming from education, third from the nonprofit engagement, civic engagement, and the 4th from housing. We should talk a little bit more about that. This is 1/3 of that class, so I'll have to emphasize that. So you can see the amount of work that goes into all of what they do. Without further ado, I think we can talk a lot more after each presentation. So it will go in that same order, right?
You got the cards from 1 to 10, so we can hold them out.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you so much for having us here. It's a pleasure for us to present in front of you, and we will really appreciate your feedback. As Ganapati introduced, we are the team that focused on economic and on the economic and business side of Liberty City, and we want to show, after all the work that we have done, we want to show that what we felt was that Miami's best kept business secret was Liberty City. That was our motto for the presentation. So, I want to introduce our team. So we have Patrice Kise, Evelyn Trammell, Lydia Silverio, and I'm Ana Maria Espan. So we wanted to start by presenting our findings. Our findings show mainly that Liberty City has a strategic location, a prime location which should be taken advantage of in economic development. So Liberty City should tap into the county's sectorial strength. We will see our colleague Lydia talking about the analysis that we have done and to understand what are the strengths in the area in Liberty City and Miami-Dade County. Also, Liberty City has the potential to serve the county's growing sectors. In the terms of business characteristics, what we have found is that the area has mostly small businesses, so the so-called mom and pop businesses with no more than 10 employees. Also, what we saw is that Liberty City is a so-called food desert. We identified in our research a small number of supermarkets. One was a well-known supermarket for everybody, Winn-Dixie, and then the others were, or for me, I'm not familiar, but not as much familiar. Also, the same thing happens with financial institutions which are really underrepresented in the area. We identified 3 banks, and what struck us as interesting that they are, we will see on the map in what follows, they are located on the margins of the area, which is really interesting. Regarding the labor force, the image in the labor force sector is that the labor force participation is kind of low, and there is represented by low-income individuals, and it's basically a high poverty area. When we identified the area as in demand for child care centers. And the last sector of our research emphasized the redevelopment potential. We are very happy to see that the area is very prone to economic development. So it has a lot of strengths that can be tackled on to develop the area. So it is part of an enterprise empowerment zone. Well, that means that the area is surrounded by numerous economic development projects, which can advantage and benefit the neighborhood. The land use. The land use is mainly residential. So there is commercial space available. We identified, and we present in the next slide the commercial spaces that we identified as available. But this can be used for economic development. And we saw that there are a lot of projects, commercial corridor development that are feasible, and Liberty City is part of some of them. Our colleague will talk further about it. So going forward, we will talk about more in detail of each of these and our recommendations for the project.
So following up again, my name is Lilia, and this slide essentially tackles on the location aspect. As Ganapati mentioned, this class is about the overall local economic development and policy recommendations. And one of the things that we learned is that, as Alexander Garvin put, that there's really no formula that will guarantee a desirable private market reaction in response to a public action. So even if you do establish policies or incentives for outside entities to come here, there have to be certain ingredients for a project or a location, in this case, to be successful, or a city. And what we have found is that Liberty City has definitely one of those ingredients, which is location, location, location. As you can see, it's close, it borders really with I-95, which is one of the main interstate highways in the country. Wynwood, which is an emerging, used to be an inner city, but no longer, and we all know about that now. Near the Port of Miami, roughly 7 miles away, downtown Miami, Miami International Airport. So definitely there's that ingredient that Garvin emphasized and that is necessary in order for a city or location to be successful. And that's definitely the one takeaway. If there was something that you could take from this presentation, is the fact that the location is there, which is critical for our community to be successful. Other things that we looked at, and also as a result of the research that was done, was the location quotient. Essentially, what this matrix does is measure the specialization of a given industry in a community or location. In this case, what we thought we could do was look at the Miami-Dade County area, which is the blue section, and compare it against the Liberty City area, which is the yellow. We just want to make some caveats, I guess, related to the data, and it's that Liberty City comes from the Beacon Council data, which is a GIS website that's updated every quarter. So we might not necessarily be comparing apples to apples, but I think that it definitely does tell a story. What we're showing you is on the left side, the areas in Miami-Dade County that we feel Liberty City could tap into because are areas where there's a strong specialization in Miami-Dade County. So as you can see, per definition, an LC of 1.0 or more means that there's an industry strength in that area. So the areas of healthcare, educational services, we do agree, even Dr. Ganapati pointed it out, this is really a question mark for us. The reason is we looked into it, such a high location quotient for Liberty City, it has to do with the employment by the local schools. So even though as you will learn, the population is not as educated in terms of employment, it is one of the biggest employees in the area. So then our recommendations are to definitely, for Liberty City, we tap into the areas of healthcare, information, auto trade, and construction. The reason why we think healthcare is important is because we know that it's an area that's constantly advancing, but then it also comes with the responsibility of education. So the education of the workforce will also be an important aspect and something that will definitely help the community. Then information, of course, is one of those industries that's always a no-brainer because it's an emerging area and technological advances are always at the forefront of the economy. Then the other analysis that we conducted was the shift share analysis. And the shift share analysis has 3 aspects. One of them has to do with the economic growth. Overall, the Miami-Dade County area, and this is based on comparing 2012 and 2014 of the Miami-Dade County area, the Miami-Dade County area experienced a 7% economic growth. So definitely Liberty City could look into some of the lessons that the county has learned to make sure that they experience a 7% growth. The proportional shift analysis, what it does is measure which industries contribute to the growth or decline of a given area. These are the areas that we thought were relevant to be taken advantage of, so definitely construction, administrative and support, and again, healthcare and social. So essentially what the proportional shift analysis shows is that in Miami-Dade County, there's a growing strength in this industry, and Liberty City should consider, or the policymakers of Liberty City should consider giving their efforts towards those industries. The differential shift analysis, what it does is to show what industries the industries are competitive in. So again, we're only showing those that we think are relevant, and where we think that Liberty City could tap into from the lessons learned in Miami-Dade County because there's a competitive advantage in those industries are utilities, management of companies and enterprises, and arts and entertainment. Something else that we have found, as Anna mentioned, has to do with the fact that in Liberty City, most of the commercial establishments are small businesses. If you look at the numbers, over 85% of the total businesses have from 1 to 10 or less employees. So there's an opportunity for the government or local government to intervene by providing small businesses loans. As Anna mentioned, one of the aspects is that these are really mom and pop stores. So there's really not a big presence of any industry that could potentially have a positive impact on the population. So some of the things we want to consider or recommend is to provide incentives to larger businesses to come to the community and even provide guidance to those business owners of these mom and pop stores to make sure that they have the opportunities or resources they need to further expand their business. As it relates to the labor participation, what we found is that it's low. It's low as compared to Miami-Dade County. We see that the labor participation in Liberty City is 52, roughly 10 points lower than Miami-Dade County. And even though that's the case, the unemployment rate is more than double. So that's huge, and it definitely tells us a story as to what kind of population or working force there is in Liberty City. So definitely there's opportunity to continue to train the labor force so that they're able to obtain their jobs and improve their labor participation. But then also in terms of education and training to make sure that they have the resources they need to be active members of the labor market.
I have a question, if I could, of this
Yeah.
here. Can you tell me what is, I understand that Liberty City is going to have a higher unemployment rate than Miami-Dade as a whole.
Right.
The Miami-Dade rate seems sort of high to me when the state counts that we have a 5% unemployment rate. So I'm curious as to what is your data source for that?
They come from the U.S. Census, from the census.
Data ACS 2014.
ACS 2014?
14, yes.
I'm not surprised that Miami.
It's from my sidewalk.
Yeah, it wouldn't be.
We got it from
My sidewalk?
all of these are
But
from
my sidewalk is
sidewalk.
pulling from the 2010 through 14.
Right. I mean, we can definitely.
No, I'm not suggesting that it's wrong. I'm not
Right.
surprised. I hadn't seen that in a while. It would not surprise me that Miami-Dade would have a higher unemployment rate than the state as a whole.
Right.
But it seems a lot.
I mean, it is what we did find, and this is where we run into a little bit of a difficulty, is the lagging time because the data on my sidewalk was from 2014, and a lot of things have happened. Of course, the economy has come back after that, et cetera, so it might not be the current rate.
No, it may be. Yeah,
I just looked up, there's a careertrends.com, that's the one that comes up in Google, and it's 5.6.
In Miami-Dade as a whole.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. So we'll have to check it. If we got that from my sidewalk, we need to make sure we're looking.
Well, one of the things about all of this data is the reliability, right?
Yeah.
So the ACS 2014, that's a 5-year
Snapshot.
Yeah. So that's a lot more reliable than some of the private sources. Private sources, of course, it definitely could have improved. This is 2014.
Right.
It would have improved over.
Yeah.
But like if we were to look at this as a snapshot as in 2014, it definitely tells a big story that even though the labor participation force rate is lower by 10 points, the unemployment rate is still twice as much as what it was back then.
Right. It's the relative figures that make a lot of the difference.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you.
Okay, so now this can be a little bit less technical. So as we mentioned before, Liberty City, it is a food desert, and what a food desert is, it basically means that people's choices about what to eat, they're severely limited by the options available to them. So and these are the options that they have, at the moment. There's one big supermarket, you know, Winn-Dixie, and then there's four smaller food markets, and there's a Walmart Supercenter to the west. But the problem is so these food markets, they don't have the options for healthy foods like Winn-Dixie would have. You know, a lot of the stuff that they're going to get there is it might be maybe less quality, more processed foods, which are high, you know, in fat and salt and sugar, and you know that's something that, you know, we need to alleviate a little bit to reduce that and to incentivize bigger, you know, supermarkets to come in and provide, you know, options for healthy eating that are also affordable. And so the total population is about 39,000, and so this is basically the options for 39,000 people. And you know what that leaves is all of them basically, if they want to have, you know, that option, they have to go into you know. So we do definitely you know, recommend financial incentives to help alleviate this food desert problem that we see. And also, if you see, like, if somebody lives on the, you know, top corner of Liberty City, they might not have a car, and to get, you know, to access this, they're gonna have to walk a long way, take a bus, you know, with all their groceries. As far as policy goes, we, you know, we recommend policies that encourage healthy eating behavior. Just give an example of, you know, like what Michelle Obama did with the Let's Move campaign, and which part of that campaign is actually to improve access to healthy, affordable foods. So maybe, you know, such a campaign will motivate, you know, the business to follow that.
Do you know how many square miles are in the Liberty City area?
About 5.
About 5 square miles?
5 to 6, depending on where you draw the line. Yep.
Okay, so we also have banks, as Anna had briefly mentioned. There's only 3 banks, and they're on opposite sides. And, you know, it is important for businesses to have an accessible banking institution nearby. You know, there's an importance of this business-banker relationship. And also a local bank, they're going to have familiarity of the community, which may facilitate, you know, the lending that, you know, that businesses would have to, you know, take on. So as we know, it is a low income and high poverty area. 26% of households have an income of $10,000 or less, and also the median household income is about $20,000 a year. So this, we include this slide just to show that there really is a need for opportunity, which businesses really could bring, you know, and to also help alleviate, you know, this disparity that exists in Liberty City. So childcare is a little bit, it's interesting because, so we also see that we also need to build up the amount of childcare is available, because if a family, if there are businesses that have jobs, how are these, you know, single parents going to work if they have to be home taking care of the kids? So this is important, but it's also for the business, because we need to incentivize more childcare institutions to be here and available for these single parents. Right now, there's only 5 daycare facilities available, and actually 54% of the women in the labor force gave birth in the last year. And 80% of families have single-parent households. That is huge. So a recommendation that we have is to increase the number of daycare facilities, and actually there is a tax credit available to businesses that do go into the child care concentration. There is a child care facility at the lower tax property exemption, and what that states is that any real estate used and owned as a child care facility is exempt from taxation. That's big. That's a huge incentive for somebody to, you know, take advantage of that in Liberty City. And finally, for my part, Liberty City is part of an enterprise empowerment zone, and what this means is that it's a designated area offering fiscal incentives to businesses that locate or expand within that area. And the objective is to encourage investment and job creation in Liberty City. And this applies to new or renovated properties. You know, some of these give tax credit for wages, which would ultimately reduce labor costs for the businesses, which they might not have that locating to areas outside of the empowerment zone. So they have a lot to take advantage of here. And also as far as, if they're going in and renovating buildings that might not be in the best condition, they get credit for construction materials. And then, like I mentioned, there is a local business tax credit and a child care tax credit. And to continue with the commercial advantages that are available, we're going to talk about some of the initiatives that are taking place. You have on the 79th Street, which is the upper northern corner. They're looking at the transportation-oriented development, where we're looking to provide a way for individuals to go to work and be able to live without having a car in the area. What's so important in this area is that it's where you have actually 3 different transportation hubs that actually connect. You have West Palm Beach, Miami, and the Metro Rail and the Amtrak. They all connect in the area. So the idea is to use existing assets that are available and to also use green initiatives so businesses can come in and use energy efficient strategies to turn here. The other problem with Liberty City is that it's an area that has a lot of empty lots in scattered places. It's not a cohesive neighborhood where you can walk from one point to another and find all of the amenities that you would need to live in a neighborhood. You see, they talked about a food desert, not having access to banks. But one of the things to look at was actually to be a bit creative and also look at other innovative sources. We talked about banks, but what would be interesting is also look at other credit unions and maybe microloan and development institutions, because that would support the micro businesses that you saw that was mentioned before and the assistances that they would need. And also working with other NGOs that may be available to provide the financing when you're not getting it from the formal sector. Also, we wanted to talk about the land use. This is what it's talking about. Mainly it's just residential, and the other remaining is either vacant or for commercial use. But for the properties that you do have in the area, the owners are not the individuals who live there. What we have going on is a heavy concentration of poverty, and Liberty City is located in the middle of a very wealthy area. So it's important to understand that you have income inequality that's going on. With this income inequality, just to give a couple of numbers, it's, more than 58% earn minimum wage, like $8 an hour. You also have more than half the individuals, they need 50% of their income to pay for housing. And as we were saying before, 20% are making, the bottom 20 are making $10,348, so $348 annually. So one of the first things you need to do is to figure out a way to settle on the housing situation for these individuals. And one of the things that we're looking at is to work with nonprofit or nonprofit developers and to see what they can build to build housing where these individuals can actually afford and want to live in. So these are what you do have. I just talked about privately what you need for the individuals who do not make money that live in the center of the city, what they need for housing. We're going to need to increase the number of units that are available to them. But you still have a lot of commercial space that's available. This is the 20% or the vacant lots that we're talking about. What's interesting with these lots is that the pricing is lower than all of the surrounding areas. So we gave some details, like there's 20 spaces. If you look through the different websites, you'll find there's spaces, the lease price is from 10 to 18, but if you just go one block over and you go to Wynwood in the neighboring areas, it jumps to about $25 or more per square feet. So this is an advantage that they have. Evelyn also talked about easy incentives. There's also some other incentives where there was a proposal made to look at tax incremental financing to see if you can get some of these vacant lots to be rented by businesses, either for private use, for development, or for the commercial use, to look at the tax incremental financing so that they can create funding mechanisms to just to pay and to provide infill so that you can have a cohesive neighborhood.
So the whole idea is to be able to plan secure resources and capable management, and to be doing this while using the resources that are there. And our team is going to talk, the next team is going to talk about the nonprofits that are very active in the area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Any questions? Yes.
The emphasis on the enterprise zone. So that program actually, to my knowledge, expired in December 2015. So I know a lot of recommendations kind of were tailored around it. But yeah, the state legislature actually let that program sunset. So right, great resource, but
So the recommendation would be to bring back programs that would be beneficial to the area.
It wasn't without effort. I'm trying to save it.
To a serious point, it's like no applications are being accepted after December 15, 2015, December 31st, 2015. Some of the things are in place, but only for a little while longer. But I think the larger point is that anytime that you're working with something that is a designation or something that is created statutorily, you need to make sure that you're double checking to make sure that the statute hasn't been changed, the program hasn't expired, that the benefits are the same. So it's not a criticism, it's just something that you run as you go along. You can't assume that any incentive is in place unless you go back and check on it. I think otherwise it's a very good presentation.
Well, let me take that particular criticism in stride, since that one of the bigger issues, the bigger picture issues, one of my other students has done a dissertation on the enterprise zone. The bigger picture issue is that they have a mixed effect, and what we are giving in terms of the incentives is tax credits, which we don't know whether it's a credit or tax. The credits are being taken, but whether they are happening in the place or not, that's not very clear. And I get to credit it out here. This is one of the places where such kind of a program is required for local ownership.
Also, honestly, just a really good observation in terms of linking, particularly the point about the daycare centers. Like that, people tend to not even really think about, in order for someone to be able to improve themselves or go to school or the daycare, or the child care is so essential. And so I think the quality of it too, right? So
something called self-daycare.
I think a lot of times in policy we just tend to focus on we need to create jobs, or we need to create, and not thinking about all of the various pieces that connect. So the coalition always focus on comprehensive, a holistic approach. You have to address all of the issues, otherwise you're going to be wondering why. We have, they have a mom and pop grant program. They have various programs out there, but you have to look at the bigger picture as to why.
Did you find the daycare? How did you find the list of daycares? Yeah, because I actually in the document that I put on the Dropbox where I created that, I made a map of the daycares in Liberty City, and there's like 30. But the map is in there. But I think that I know this data set is people that do it out of their house. So you can look, all the black diamonds are daycares, but there's at least 30 here.
So that goes to quality and when it's certified, that sort of thing.
Yeah, because that's.
Vince, do you have any observations?
I think the food desert stuff is very interesting, so I like that portion.
Thank you.
Ed?
I think addressing that helps to address a lot of other problems as well. I think that's the core issue, and then other things can fill in around that, maybe.
Ed, do you have any observations?
No, I thought it was very good.
Good. Well, excellent.
Thank you.
Good job.
Oh, yes. Before we
So-
start, I'd like to also recognize that participating by webinar, we also have Ms. Katrina Wright. She's from Bank United. She's a vice president of community get our title right. So she's Vice President for Community Development and Outreach, Banks United. And she's a longtime friend, a big, very interesting community development. So I just want to recognize that this is here watching through the internet. So.
Shifted to the,
Yeah, she's great.
oh no. Hold on, I think we put the font.
Alright, well, I'm just going to need you to log in. Is this going to your computer?
Yeah. They're looking at this, but they can connect on the.
I don't get out much, unfortunately.
I'm not sure.
It's recovering. I think the problem is that. Yeah.
So
you're a grower, right? What did you put
No, we don't get that.
Now it's restart.
I think you're,
oh,
I was 95. 21 years.
Go ahead, try to do it. I'm going to see if I can make.
We overlap for one.
maybe we'll change pace and you guys go first.
I mean, I had someone there, but you know, yeah, but I mean, I'm not 500.
So change pace a little bit. Instead of the education group going,
Permanent? Like,
this one is working. Oh, this is the other one. The second, third group. The
problem is that we need to log into the webinar to share the screen.
No, this is still your company.
Okay.
Yeah. But for the third one.
Everything is okay. Oh, so we switch.
Everybody do the,
All right, it's all yours.
All right, I am Kevin Forward, and this is, I am Pallavi.
Hello. Hello.
So we are actually looking at the civic engagement and of course primarily the role of non-profits in the liberty area. And engagement is kind of really very close to my heart and my personality aspect because I'm really an engagement person. So we really want to begin with saying that civic engagement is really at the very heart of Liberty City. We all really want to engage and create an environment of healing touch. So on that front, we really look at civic engagement and the role of nonprofits, how it is so much very critical to bring in that environment of collaboration in the space like Liberty City. So just an overview of what our presentation will be about. We'll first focus at the local nonprofits and some of the things they've already started to do to kind of get that civic engagement going. And then we'll look at the types of charities in Liberty City or the nonprofit organizations, just on a map, kind of spread out in their different categories. We'll also look at the longevity of a few of those organizations. Of course, there's over 500 organizations, but just looking at those that are active, so those that we can see their 990 forms and their missions and visions. And then we'll further look at the categories of nonprofit organizations. We try to categorize them as best we could. Of course, some of them may offer services that others do, but just mostly looking at their vision and the core of that organization. And also, we did some interviews with a few leaders in those nonprofit organizations, and just then we'll end with focusing on some of the challenges of those nonprofit organizations.
So here, of course, we're all familiar with the Miami Children Initiative. I know we talk about the food deserts, but they also have their fresh food co-op where they try to kind of combat that disparity that they have in Liberty City. Also, the African Heritage Cultural Center, someplace I've African danced since I was a little girl, offering dance, music, and art, kind of capitalizing and highlighting the talent that's within the community. And of course, the Miami Foundation, they're the 2016 community grant recipients. And here, Ms. Paula added Mr. Barry Jenkins.
Yeah, actually, I mean, when we really talk about the places like Liberty City, always there's a question that what kind of civic capacity we can really find. It's kind of a very broad question. So we're just looking at this person named Barry Jenkins. He's actually the person who was born in Liberty City in the year 1979, and he, at the age of 12, his father died, and he was actually raised by a neighborhood person in a overcrowded community. And this person actually is now a director of, mostly he focuses on the movies which are more of art movies. So this recently movie released which is called Moonlight, and which has got rave reviews, and it's one of the very interesting paradigms which he kind of creates, this identity of a child who is a teenager and how the whole gay identity actually develops. And so that's kind of really one of the very interesting ways to look at that. This places really can offer such kind of energy, potential, and creativity if there is an environment to engage. So play this video, just play a little clip of this movie. I don't know if it's not there. Maybe you all can watch the movie. Yeah, so yeah.
Here's that map that I was briefly telling you about. Right here we have the subsections and classification. Of course, all of them are subsections. Classifications, we just, between 1,000 and 2,000 is charitable, and between 7,000 and 7,200 is religious. Right here is color-coded, so you can see how those nonprofit organizations are spread out and which colors you see the most. And if you look closer, you'll notice that a lot of the religious organizations are really popular within the Liberty City area.
Yeah, and one of the key organizations which are centered, which have been really doing a very good work in the Liberty City, like Tecolsi and Miami Children's Initiative. They're really been very active and work is really visible. So moving forward, we looked at the data from National Charitable Statistics. So we found almost around 500 plus organizations which were kind of in and around Liberty City area. So to narrow it down further, we kind of started looking at the zip codes of Liberty City, and then we shortlisted some 130 organizations which are working in the Liberty City area. And then furthermore, what we did was that looked at the mission vision of these 130 organizations going to different resources like IRS 990 forms, and then also looking at there's this website which has a lot of data on nonprofit guide star, so which year it was created, and also using all that data we came out with this chart which you can
here on this pie graph we have it color coded, just kind of breaking the nonprofit organization down into 5 categories, because of course we can make a lot of categories for them, but just to simplify it, as you can see, 74% of the organizations that we looked at are faith-based. And I thought that was, I don't know, I thought that stood out a lot about about Liberty City. And of course, just looking at the history of Liberty City, where it started, understanding that faith was really the foundation for that culture. And that would explain why it lasted so long. And also, the faith organizations not only provide religious services, but they do provide daycare. There are some faith services that have community gardens as well. So I believe that's what kept the sustainability of some of those faith-based organizations. We thought it was important to highlight the ages of those organizations as well. As you can see, we have a lot of new organizations. One thing about economic development we know is long-term is very important. That's how you see the difference that they're making. So in order to get to this level, 41 to 20 years of sustainability, these organizations have to make sure they have very good management of resources. One thing about nonprofit organizations, funding is always the biggest issue, but it's the proper management of resources, talent, and of course training and mentoring the people that work for you, because you kind of just have to work with what you got. And that's what gets you to the many years here. So once those younger organizations reach that threshold, then they'll begin to thrive more. And we can probably see the difference that they're making within the community.
And also one of the things which when we look at the data, is the number of faith-based organizations is the most which we found. And they are the new ones, like 0 to 10 years old. Most of them are like really new. So it's kind of really contrasting way to look at that. Why do we really have still like religious, United States really have a history of non-profit organizations which are church-based and faith-based for long, like it's been almost 200 to 50 years old. But now still, like we do really see these young organizations are again church-based associations or faith-based organizations. Although we do have the diversification as well. So that's one of the factors to focus on. So when we categorize these organizations based on like faith-based, youth and family, the focus of youth and family and children, women empowerment, training and capacity development, and environmental health. So see, these kind of services they are doing. Faith-based are like really the Sunday services, Sunday school, they have daycare, community gardens, and volunteer opportunities. Youth and family-based organizations are working mostly in the education support area, family housing assistance, sport development, nutrition assistance, clothing, and other needs. Women empowerment, of course, women support groups, adolescent girls and families. These are some of the focus areas, and this is really interesting. Although we didn't find many women empowerment focus, but this is one of the areas which probably we looked at. Training and capacity development, we have job training and vocational schools they are doing. Although we have more coming up in the education part, more on this area. Environment and health, of course, is one of the key areas, which is upcoming green initiatives, HIV/AIDS, and also helping government is like Medicaid.
And again, like we mentioned, of course, some of these organizations provide a lot of it, but we're just focusing on their mission and the core services that they offer. This is kind of what we categorize.
Yeah, so moving forward, we kind of tried to do some interviews with the non-profit organizations. Although as we had a limited time, we could just focus on 4 interviews of the individuals who are leading the organization. So Kevin, I will talk about for that one.
This is Miss Elaine Black here. She was not here, but it was definitely a pleasure speaking with her. She has a lot of wisdom about what's going on within the Liberty City area. And I thought, in the conversation that I was having with her, a lot of things, I've only been in the field, compared to her team a little bit of time, but I've already seen the things that she mentioned, and those things were funding issues. Of course, with nonprofits, it's always limited. They'll give you a little bit, but it's important that you fundraise. Like, you literally need a team that every day wakes up and say, who am I going to talk to today about getting money for our organization? And that's really important. And of course, because of the lack of funding and lack of resources, or the human resource, employees, or maybe even just the knowledge base and ability to go out and know who to speak to and how to speak to them, it probably makes it a little harder to do that. Also, management issues. That's important. This is what you have, and you have to learn how to allocate it, and you have to know what's more important, prioritizing in the nonprofit organization. What do you need? What do we need right now? What's more important and what's not as important. Mr. Horace Roberts from Tacoma, I also sat down and spoke with him. Of course, he also mentioned the funding issues, but he also talked about corporate sponsorships. Liberty City, as she mentioned with Mr. Barry Jenkins, has a lot of talent. There's a lot of people that come out of Liberty City, go out and become something great, but they forget to come back and contribute to their community. And I think the nonprofit organizations might need to jump on that. They may need to do the research and find out who was here and how do we get them back. We have a sports development program, and it's named after an NFL football player. Now you have kids wanting to become more involved. Now you have other high status athletes or individuals that may say, okay, why did that individual want to go back? Maybe that's something I should look into. And also, another thing I noticed with a lot of the nonprofit organizations, they have the space, they have the capacity, but they don't have the resource, the human resources. Like for Tacoma example, after we view the center, they have an area upstairs full of computers and technology, and they want to do coding, but they don't have anybody to come teach it. So just tapping a little bit into the business, and we had businesses, say we had a computer technology business in Liberty City. They could literally send somebody there to teach a coding class and then kind of send those same people and put it back into their business. It's almost like a training center for that organization. So you're kind of keeping that talent within the same area. So those were, just to summarize that, funding, of course, is the issue, but if we kind of capitalize on fundraising and reaching back out to those who came from the communities, we can probably improve in that area, and also management of resources.
Yeah, so these are, like, I interviewed these two people. One person is Mr. Hashim Benford. He was the director of this organization called FIU. And the entire focus of my discussion was more on the leadership part. What is the critical role of non-profit leaders? So he was actually talking back and forth about the importance of collaborative vision. Creating a visioning, when we do a visioning exercise, actually it's really important to bring in all the stakeholders at one place and just see that how can we really create those visions which are very integrated. And of course, when you have this broad-based collaborative understanding of the vision and all the stakeholders really participate in it, so it's really easy to share that vision amongst the team and the people, and then of course the community as well. So it's not only the leaders of non-profits or the organizations like South Florida Regional Council really need to do the visioning process. Also, we need the community for participation in the visioning process. That was one of the very critical areas which she was talking about. Also, of course, as usual, as she's talked about, the challenges on securing resources is one of the critical challenge for every non-profit. Whoever you talk to, they will always say that funding is a big issue. So that's what he was also talking about. And one of the very interesting which he said is that most of these government agencies, they're kind of really, when it comes to non-profit organizations or the community representation, it's kind of more of a tokenism. It's not the real involvement and integration that when we talk about engagement. So it's really an engagement which really needs to come at the platform, and the real process of collaboration should be there. So that's what he was talking about in terms of leadership and his role as an individual who's leading this organization, the challenges to engage these various stakeholders in the process. I also briefly spoke to the Ms. Gina Ha. She's the Family Leadership Director of Catalyst Miami, and her focus is mostly on the leadership capacity building programs which she has been conducting in the places like Liberty City. So what she was talking was mostly on that these programs make participants, and this knowledge and skill development is really an important area, and we really need to do a lot with these kind of communities to encourage civic capacity and all of that. But one of the interesting aspects which she was talking about is that when we are doing these programs in these communities, if there is a government representative who is also participating with us, so we really get a buy-in of the community. We get these people really on board, and there is a lot of embracing which really is in the process, and which really oftentimes is missed. So these are some of the very intriguing perspectives which we got from them, although it was kind of a really brief interview, so there's a lot to explore and dig into the work of non-profits and the community itself. So that's our, so the recommendation part, it's really a lot of challenge for non-profits. This third sector space is really having a lot of challenge. And in the times today when we see this whole paradigm of service, creating the culture of service in organizations, then the role of non-profits is really key. So the part which really is important, which I see, is that the leadership among the non-profit sector, efforts to develop leaders who can envision a robust community development strategy and mobilize resources. So you have this visioning process, you have these people, and then how do you strategize? The strategy part, integrating vision and strategy is really important. So of course, it goes to the implementation, resources, and all of those things really come into place. But I would really recommend that this has to be a very engaging community visioning strategy which needs to be there. Because I was reading this community, the South Florida Regional Council has this comprehensive economic development strategy. So although there wasn't much focus on the visioning process, there was more on the strategic part, which I was finding on the website. So I think one can really look at that aspect in a very positive way.
And just kind of piggybacking on the leadership, management, and talent retention, again, about funding and resources, sometimes these organizations can't afford to have master's students come in, people with education that's a little more familiar or have a better understanding of what it takes to run these programs. So maybe there should be some staff training, mentoring, and kind of creating a more positive culture, kind of educating the staff that you have, because you kind of have to work with what you got. I think that kind of adds to it as well. And that creating that culture of continuously instilling the vision. This is what we're doing for. This is what we're doing for. That continual reminder, because sometimes in nonprofit organizations working in that area, it could get a little disappointing because you don't get what you want as fast enough. So just continually reminding us why we're doing it, so that people will want to work hard and still want to give a little more. But again, secure resources. Of course, limited, as we said before, there are limited government funding, so that's limited resources. And an increase in fundraising initiatives and sponsorship can add to those resources. Over here, engaging the government, private, and knowledge sectors. That kind of reminds me of the fact that there are so many faith-based organizations. I know that Miami Children Initiative works with a lot of faith-based organizations, but I think more collaboration with them can probably increase the effectiveness of the nonprofit organization. Maybe we don't need as many, but if we can kind of bring in the newer organizations, if we all have the same vision, why not work together? You know, more resources. The more people working together, the more shared vision, the more resources we have. So I think that can also be a way that we can see the nonprofit organizations becoming more effective in the Liberty City area.
Also, one of the things is like when we do the visioning process itself, we can always define in the vision itself the role of government, private, and knowledge, because it's a collaborative era and they cannot really sustain yet.
And just adding a little bit more with government, getting them more involved and more educated on what these nonprofit organizations need.
Thank you.
Transition to a new computer.
How are you with their presentation? Yeah. I think points pretty much very spot on as it relates to nonprofits, particularly in the South Florida area, and some of the challenges that they face. I mean, including myself as a nonprofit, funding issue is always, you know, a significant issue. You know, I know you had the Miami Foundation listed there. You know, they recently had to give Miami Day, and then, you know, we've got government, and we've, I mean, not thinking any of those resources will ever really ever increase, although they should. But we also have to cultivate that culture of giving here that doesn't really exist like in some places. So, you know, the fact that, you know, the Miami Foundation can move forward and raise, you know, sponsor Give Miami Day and raise over $9 million in 24 hours, it starts to raise the awareness of the role of nonprofits, but it's essential. The other part, the collaboration is key. I smile because when you said some of them are small, they need to work together. I think it makes so much sense, but it is so difficult. You know, within the coalition, one of the biggest things that we work on is really creating that environment of trust, because that is one of the things that really stands in the way of many of the nonprofits working together. There's the trust and the fighting over scarce resources.
I was going to say they compete for them.
So, whereas, as you indicated, if you come together, you know, funders oftentimes they want to see that collaboration. They don't want to fund 10 people to do the same thing on the same block. Right. And so that's a lot of the issues that we face here. But, you know, all the organizations that you interviewed, I know well. I do a lot of work with Catalyst, so I just think all of your observations were really spot on in terms of just some of the challenges as well as opportunities for nonprofits.
I just want to add to it. Actually, I'm interested in doing some work on the nonprofit leadership as my research part of my PhD dissertation. That's what I'm planning to do, and then look at, of course, this whole paradigm of vision and service leadership and the culture, all of that kind of.
And I would add in that first column, I would actually specify governance, because you kind of have to separate governance, the actual board of the, you know, because you have leadership internally, you have your ED, you have your staff, but you also need a strong board. And some of the most
well-run boards, they have really strong leadership that's strategic and vision. That's where the strategic and the visioning really should be happening, and then your staff can, you know, execute like the vision. But a lot of times we have boards that just really don't have the right composition to really move the organization forward. So you get stagnation, or like boards that just, you know, they're not, organizations that are not where they should be. And so that's a really big issue, is governance as well.
That's an excellent point, and also that goes to the representation from the community. Who brings that voice? I'm just curious, what has been your experience with churches?
In terms
of if there is any, what the extent of their involvement for community development activities? Mostly they're involved in the Sunday schools and so forth.
Well, I
but
mean,
there's a lot more opportunity.
There's some faith-based like community development. I mean, CDC's not as much as there used to be. You know, at one point in time, there was the encouragement of faith-based community development corporations or community. So they're still there, you know, engaged in like the social services aspects of it. But I think it's really different from the rest of kind of like that nonprofit sector in terms of just the kind of working, doing their own little thing versus us kind of working together. And you know, it's very fragmented at times. So where it just seems, as an outsider observing, it just seems that it would make sense for folks to. You also have to understand some of the underlying issues as to why the groups are not working together. So
the political side of it.
I thought it was an excellent presentation, and I very much enjoyed it. My observation would be that it would be interesting to see some additional work as an analysis of the nonprofit as to budget, staff, you know, well, it's not so much the longevity of the organization, but, and Shakira knows more about this than I do, but I would just say that I think my sense, that's why I'd be interested in seeing what the facts are. My sense is that except for maybe a big nonprofit like California, Miami, I think a lot of them are very small. So there's an issue of capacity and what you're able to do. And I would say that even
I know it's really investing in capacity building, really.
Right, and it's very difficult. I can tell you, even for our organization, we're a very small agency, and we're much smaller than we used to be even a couple of years ago due to continued budget cuts, et cetera. So for us, it's a challenge to also find new talent, also to make sure that we're providing the training and the team building and all those types of things. I'm trying to work on doing those things along with members of my team, but it's not real easy. So I would think for a nonprofit organization that even be more challenging. The other observation I would make, and I'm sure that in your master's public administration program you've been studying this, community engagement, frankly, I think is the most difficult aspect, one of the most difficult aspects of work, to have meaningful community engagement over a sustained period of time. And as you study the Arnstein's ladder, you know there's different levels. There's tokenism that you have at the beginning, but then there's also how far are you able and willing to turn over decision making to the community, which is like the ultimate expression of it. And you know, so I would just say I would not be too harsh as people try to undertake community engagement activities that's meaningful, because it is very, very challenging. And again, you might have something to add along that line. I would also just observe that government agencies, even big ones, sometimes are limited in staff. Like when you're talking about a commission staff or something, you might have a handful of people that are stretched very thin. So when you go to government plays multiple roles as a convener. I think that was that, but I think the comment was that they need to be more engaged on a continual basis with the community. I think they seek to do that if they're working for elected officials, because they're constituents and such. But I would just say, you know, I think government is smaller than it used to be, and we're being asked more and more to do more and more with less. And I don't think that has really changed all that much, or is expected to change. I think it'll get more constrained over time, right? Not more, you know, not more resources.
So there's definitely room for improvement.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's room for improvement in all of it.
With
But I'm just saying, I think that we have to be a little aware that even, I think that we all have limitations. And, if you have, for example, Karen Hamilton of our staff, who I would have loved for her to be here. I think you've met her before. But Karen Hamilton was very much looking forward to being here. She's our planning director, basically. Brilliant woman, very talented. She had to go to Miami unexpectedly because there was a meeting that we had to cover for our board. And so, sometimes you have hard decisions to make.
So in the interest of time,
That's it.
It's really important input we will incorporate in our.
No, I think it's a great presentation. I'm very impressed with both the presentations I've seen so far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
this is education.
We're actually
I think Cal's is pretty big. But they're not. We're doing this one. Well, it's an accepted development program, and we're working on it.
Oh, yes.
performance, like everyone has like a performance. No, actually, I have a performance challenge that take it on.
Yeah, there you go.
It's still going to be a long.
Oh, how nice. There you go.
Would you like to present?
Yeah, we're doing it locally. Yeah, I'll forward you some. Hey, I'll take it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, show me there.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. So our presentation was on education in Liberty City, and particularly we decided to focus on secondary education, so high school, and as well as continuing education for adults primarily. My name is Crystal Lean. This is Lorenzo Lolo Benin, and yeah, Cordova. Yeah, aka Lolo. So our first information are the main findings that we got from the research that we did on education. The first finding, which is usually sort of contradictory to what you think when an area is thought to be performing poorly, is that there's a plethora of educational programs that already exist in Liberty City. The issue that we did run into is that there's not a lot of integration and data about how these programs are actually impacting, whether they're directly impacting any outcomes that has to do with education. I mean, our nonprofit team members or class members already presented on all the different small organizations that deal with a lot of things. A lot of them deal with education. So our second finding was that although graduation rates have increased for the area high schools, and dropout rates have also decreased, students are graduating unprepared for higher education. And the final finding that we found is that a high percent of the adult population does not finish high school, which also correlates with the high unemployment rates as well as the poverty rates that exist within Liberty City. Okay. So this is just a brief overview of the bigger programs that we find that do education or continuing education in the Liberty City area. I did include the Related Group, which is a company, but they're the ones that are working on the Liberty City Rise. And they also have the potential We Rise project, which has to do with education in Liberty City. So we did find that although, like I said in the conclusions, was that although there are many programs that are dealing with education, secondary education, as well as vocational training and such, there's not a lot of information sharing about what's going on, not only to the population, but as well as within what's overlapping and how you look at it overall, of whether you know, 2 or 3 different organizations are working on the same thing, and what really is the impact that they're having with the resources that they're being given to impact education and continuing adult education. So our recommendation in this manner is to create an integrated committee or, you know, community group that of the various educational agencies, which they can create reports and also network with the public about what type of opportunities they have for not only, you know, school-age children, but as well as adults that are looking for job training or continuing education.
All right. We're going to move on to high school. We definitely, of course, Liberty City is a neighborhood within like 6 square foot miles, 6 square miles. So we went ahead and looked at the high schools within the area, which is Miami Central, Miami Northwestern, Miami Edison, and Miami Jackson. Our overall findings were that the graduation rates have increased, the dropout rates have decreased, but the students were not prepared for higher education. So, how about?
The sub-finding was the dropout rates, like she said, have generally decreased, which is an interesting finding because you think, you know, you have a lot of dropouts going up. But there are some concerns, even though Miami Edison is sort of like out here. This is from my sidewalk. We could click the interactive map where if you click on it, you'll go there and you'll see you'll see the data moving around. But for simplicity purposes, we just have a screenshot here. And Miami Northwestern is the only high school that's actually within the Liberty City framework. Miami Jackson, Edison, and Central are a little outside of it. But you do have some students that will attend those schools that are from the Liberty City area. So that's why we've looked at those schools. And you'll see that Northwestern has gone down in their dropout rates, Miami Jackson. And one thing I want to highlight is the dropout rate and the graduation rate. The dropout rate tends to be looked at in each individual school year, how many kids started the school year and then ended up leaving but not going to another school. And the graduation rate is like a cohort. Like we started together in 9th grade, how many people ended up in 12th grade graduating. So a lot of times people get confused and think they're related to each other. And the dropout rate, even though it's like 1% or 3%, you're looking at it sounds like a small number. This is amounting to about 200 to 300 students every year just simply not finishing school and just not going anywhere. So our recommendation was that we need to foster adult education programs for these dropouts, and we do have that, but we feel like there's no way to really contact these students. Where do they go? Do we keep in touch with these students? Is there a system in place to actually communicate with those who have just come out of the system? So that was our main recommendation from this screen.
How do you all measure whether they're prepared once they graduate to go on to higher education?
Yeah, what we're doing basically is we're giving you the finding real quick, recommendation, and then we're going to go into.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, she's going to go ahead and explain that a little bit more. This screen was just basically telling you that we have a problem with the dropout, and the quick recommendation is do we have a way of connecting with these students? They're leaving the school. Do we just not care about them anymore? And I didn't find anything really where there's some kind of way where we're communicating with them. Most of the programs usually see is helping students who are going to drop out or who are having problems in school. But what happens when they finally do actually take that action and leave? And so what we're saying is let's have some type of maybe adult program or something where we can communicate with these particular students who left in that school year. So she's going to go ahead and explain the issue with why we think we're not prepared for college.
So just to continue, our graduation rates are going up, which is really great, and that is due to like some of the education programs, such as the education effect that are happening in Liberty City. So as you can see, these are the 4 within the area, and they're like steadily going up, which is great to see. And then for those who are graduating, just a recommendation is that we can create more initiatives for getting them into college. So where we see the problem is when we look at the SAT scores that we find from Miami-Dade Public Schools that are out every year, is the very top is the national average. The following is the Florida average. And this is the average for state universities within Florida, and these are all of the averages of the schools within Liberty City. So as you can see, it's more than a 200-point difference from what a the state university requirement is. Which is, yeah, so you see a huge difference in between that, and we use the SAT because that's a standardized test, of course, within the whole entire United States. So our recommendation here is to create SAT prep classes and strengthen relationships with local colleges and universities to maybe have more programs of visiting, maybe them coming and
things of that sort.
So something that the economic presentation sort of touched upon in dealing with education is that about 28% of the population that's over 25 years old has less than a high school degree. So we see that this obviously correlates with high unemployment and poverty rates. Research has shown that somebody that's continuing high school will make up to $200,000 more than somebody that just finishes at high school. So our recommendation would be to target the working age population, which would yield more direct and immediate results affecting unemployment and poverty when it comes to training and continuing education. So these are some economic findings. As they had presented before, the unemployment rate in Liberty City is about 25%. So 25% of 16 years of the population 16 years and older are unemployed, and about 74% of the population, the total population, lives 200% below poverty level. So as we see, the biggest population group are those of working ages, so it's the 25 to 54-year-olds. So that would obviously be the more immediate target to placement in continuing education and job training that would affect the economic statistics.
Okay. One of the findings that we found when we looked at technical colleges, for example, but going back to what we showed you before, a lot of the students are dropping out of high school and don't have the skills to get a high-paying job. So we looked at where do they go now? Some of the people who are actually going somewhere, where they go to technical school, and the three programs that we saw with the highest percent of job placement was in educational services, healthcare, and accommodation and food services. So what we said was, based on that finding, our recommendation was to look at some vocational training that would focus on some of those sectors. Not to say to distinguish the other sectors, but we noticed that those are the places that we get the bigger job placements. So we're like, okay, if they're getting the bigger job. And we also looked at computer. I think computer was also on there. We'll see it on here, but computer was also part of the largest job placement in the technical schools. So those people who drop out, maybe we can get them to look at, hey, you can improve your salary or improve your wages if you can get into some of these programs so they have a higher job placement. So that was our recommendation from that. This is the same screen showing the same thing that we looked at. We got this data from I think it's from the Florida Department of Education. They have a portal that shows you the technical colleges, which they call them now, so technical schools. Yeah, you can go back to this one. Yeah. Okay, and Job Corps, I wanted to go into Job Corps to what's already happening, because some of this is already happening. It's just Miami Job Corps has helped a lot of teenagers, and one of the good things is Job Corps, when you look at their center rating for Miami Job Corps, they're beating the national average, which is a good thing. But what we were saying was, going back to the dropout students, what about those students? Is there a way to know if some of these students are actually from the dropout? So how do we know who's the ones that dropped out and got into this? So maybe trying to find a way to measure that to find out. So we're not saying that it's not happening, because as Yvette and Crystal showed you earlier, there's a lot of programs out there that are, but the problem we see is there's no correlation of the information of performance with all of them sitting down and saying, hey, this is what we're getting. We kind of found the information to be disconnected. So what I was saying here was, why don't we look to see which students that dropped out actually came into this program, and then we can try to trace these dropout students. And this is the same thing. And that was pretty much our presentation.
Super. Hey, I just think it was great. I really don't have anything to add.
So what do you think about the dropout connect thing up? Like how to trace these dropouts?
I can't remember the exact term. There's a report that was created by Policy when we were undergoing the HUD Sustainable Communities Program. And I talked about the large proportion of the population that's not in school and not employed. And I think that's sort of it's really interesting. I'm very intrigued by that whole idea that you all raised about what exactly is happening to them, where are they, how do we know where they are, how do we track them.
And I'm sure the information is there. It's just that, like, so many students end up in maybe a technical program. So maybe asking them, like, school within the last 5 years? Did you finish high school and finding out? I mean, a lot of people do finish high school, but what we're noticing is there's still a lot, 250 students every year not finishing high school. Where are these students going? Are they going back to a GED program? So it'd be good to like kind of track them.
I think it really underscores the importance of vocational programs. Because, you know, we're all raised, like, when you're, at least I was raised with the whole idea, you got to go to college and stuff like that, but frankly, it's not for everybody. And that's not bad. I mean, you need people that are skilled and actually can do stuff with their hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's essentially the
Fix a car, I mean, honestly,
Focusing
without
on
people who are
vocational.
vocationally skilled, what would we do? We wouldn't be able to function in society. So I think it's very important to make sure that we're elevating the importance of these jobs.
And I think the school system is very geared toward an academic track.
Because that's traditionally the way it's
Yeah.
sort of been. But I think for sure there's I hear it in the meetings that I go to, whether it's Career Source or Enterprise Florida or meetings of the Career Provider Alliance or Chamber, you know, that there's, I think, a real understanding that you need all types of jobs and all types of paths for everybody. Not everybody's going to, you know, not you need choices for people.
There's been quite a few studies on the skills mismatch, that there are job opportunities here, but the skills don't match the jobs that need to be filled.
Yeah, there's a high, like, health services, and a lot of them.
And that's a growing sector.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting older, and there's a lot of old people.
Yeah.
You know, so health services are more and more important.
Usually it tends to focus on retail or, you know, or food services, and that's really where they get stuck.
Well, I think that the vocational jobs, most of them are highly skilled and they pay really, really well. So anything that we can do to raise awareness about that is great. And that would be a focus of the economic development strategy. We're undergoing now the updating of it. We're going to start, and I'll invite you all to come and be part of that process.
And that also goes to the training. I heard, I don't remember what college it was, where they said it used to be called train and pray, because like you would train folks and pray that they found someone versus actually, you know, working with what we call large anchored institutions like the hospital, and really work with them to find out what is the need that they really have, and train people, match people up now. But I think a lot of times, like, you know, we have these programs, but they don't necessarily match the employer's needs. And so when I heard that term, I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Train and pray.
Hoping you find something
versus like deliberately.
Yeah, looking for what exactly they need.
I think the Cleveland model, in terms of what Cleveland Clinic did and working with the community, is like one of the best examples in terms of working to match your employers, potential employees with.
Well, potentially here also there is a scope for high schools to have a particular role in that, and that's where I had some of the job training core folks.
I know it's vocational institutions like that
used to do that.
There's schools that are geared to that, aren't there? I believe so.
Yeah, it's happening to a degree. Like we said, we give a lot of congratulations. It's happening, but it's just like a lot of pockets of it.
Right. I think the Beacon Council has really tried to move it forward with the Talent Development Network. Yeah, I see that you came across that.
Oh yeah, the guy from UM. What's his name? We have a couple of folks from FIU also in that talent development.
Great job.
Thank you.
Last but not the least, Jam.
So hopefully I'm talking about something that you're thinking about, which is maybe going home. But so I'm going to be covering housing and also covering a little bit on the crime issue. And again, going from my sidewalk, you all know the history of the pork and beans and this area of Liberty City that began in 1937. It was actually the first project ever, public housing project in the United States. Yeah. What we did find is that 97% of the people who live there are burdened in their housing costs, which is something that's over 35%. Next slide.
But you know, when that project was created, it was never intended to be permanent housing for the residents. It was a very middle-class project, taking people that had been displaced from, I think, the Overtown
There was
black community, and that project and I don't even like to use the word project, that community at that time really was sort of a starter community where people would come, they would live, and they would leave.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
It changed very much.
And it brings up a lot of issues in terms that you talked about through the other presentations about trust. I mean, you know, this story has almost been written over and over again from Brickell, you know, moving people temporarily to a better place, and it falls through. So another initiative that's happening here, and hopefully we'll see it change, but yeah, you're right. This was over to relieve overcrowding in colored towns, today's called, you know, during the time of segregation.
Oh, displacement.
Yeah, and then when segregation ends, you have this exodus of a portion of the population that's productive, and you know we end up with this. Next, for whatever reason, everybody's interested in how many square miles. So there it is, 1.4 square miles. But what you really see the character here is it's a very unique place. We have a very young population, but yet you know very maybe underemployed, undereducated, and things like that. What I tried to do is do a comparison. My number is a little bit different, a little bit in terms of unemployment, it was around 20%. But the point here is you see the stark difference. I mean, you're living blocks away, and you have a stark difference in both unemployment and median income and things like that. Predominantly, it's a minority neighborhood. Where it says white, you can also add the word other. Next. So we looked at the entire housing area. We found housing that goes as far back as 1930s. 53% of the housing was built before 1960. So you really do have a housing stock that is aging, and something that really should be thinking about in terms of how to maintain it and develop it and preserve it. There's also a significant portion that are vacant. And that's where some of my other members are talking about, you know, dilapidated areas and abandoned areas. And 32% are owner-occupied. Next. So this is where the housing rental situation is and how everyone is overburdened in terms of their housing. And it's not necessarily because the rents are so high, but it's just that the income is so low. However, people who do have don't have a mortgage, obviously, are doing a lot better. Next. So here, this is an overlay of, I'm sure you're aware, in 2015, the City of Miami Police installed a system called ShotSpotter. You guys heard about it? Yeah. And what was interesting about that is that up until this point, they were tracking crime based on calls. And when the results came out that were 800% off, they thought, you know, well, you know, the system is off. The truth of it is that crime is beyond rampant. People were not even calling 911. And so these were some of the quotes that we found where people, by 7 o'clock at night, if you didn't have what you had, you stayed home. People were not calling the police. In Liberty City, people were very reluctant to even participate and talk. So you do have a severe crime issue. Next. If you want to know which day of the week bullets are being expended the most, for whatever reason it's a Thursday, you know, you would think it's a Friday, but not to make light of something, but it's a severe, intense area where you have a lot of violence. And of course that's going to have secondary effects in terms of education and employment and your future and hope and things along those lines. Next. This is the project that was just awarded to the, just lost the name. Right, Related. It's Related Group. It's a very good project. You know, from what we saw of it, it really addressed a lot of the issues in terms of preschool, daycare, education, changing it to a mixed-use kind of situation, providing health care and things like that. It doesn't really address Lincoln Fields, which seems to be one of the areas where a lot of crime is going on between Lincoln Square and Lincoln Fields. So the concern is what's going to happen as we redevelop this area, how likely will this sort of be something that undermines the project when you have middle class income families maybe not choosing to move into these units. Next, I also looked at transportation. About 30% don't have access to a vehicle, and what I try to give you here is what they do resort to. Everything from a taxi to a bike to carpooling and metro rail. But here you basically see the bus routes. So it is very well covered. East, west, express routes. You've got even a loop, an intercity loop neighborhood, sort of a trolley, and then these are the stations for the metro rails. So it's got certainly a lot of access to it. Next slide. So really, in summary, for us, the project for the related group really seems to be addressing a lot of things. When they talk about the food desert, if they're bringing in a 40,000 square foot grocery store, when they're talking about housing, they're doing that. Part of the project requires that when they do the construction, that they employ residents from the area. So it'll be hopefully an area that creates a lot of jobs. And the other one, as far as our recommendations, is the issue of crime control. As they start going through the phases and moving one phase to the next phase, are we really looking at transporting problems into a different area? You know, what the process will be for moving people and sort of screening the issues related to crime. And I think that's it. Sure.
I know you said you want to end at 8:30. So
Yeah, but I have some group picture
a big
Yeah. I have a group picture for the website. I guess, no, it's all right. We can go on a few minutes. I mean,
right. The big message we wanted to give out here is really, if you look at going out from Forward Town to Wynwood to Liberty City, this is the next frontier. And you are going to see a lot of redevelopment pressure here over the next 10 to 15 years. If we are not woken up to it, this is early enough for us to make policy changes. And gentrification, which is the biggest issue in these areas, that is going to be there.
well, I think displacement. I mean, I know sometimes gentrification and displacement are used interchangeably, but I do think it's different. I mean, I think that investment in an area that improves the area could be considered gentrification, but I think it's the displacement part.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's the issue of displacement thing.
Two additional points.
Sorry that Elaine Black is here.
Yeah, this is good for Elaine Black. Two big points I want to make before, I think one of them, we made it in various groups. 80% of these are single-family, single-headed households, and 75% of that is single mom. Think about that for a moment. Yeah, that means that's huge.
Yeah,
and over 50% of this is over 1960. Yeah, before 1960. This is getting to a lot of redevelopment potential. You are going to have the single moms being displaced.
Another phenomenon is the older the housing, the more stable and economically better off that neighborhood is. So it was actually the opposite.
More established.
Very established, more caring about what's going on.
I would just say, like on the transportation, one of the things that we will be looking at through the studies that we've done through the 792 corridor project as well, is that I know when you're looking at the little snapshot of the 5 square mile area with the route, what's important to do is to find out where the employment centers are, and then check the connectivity of the route to those centers and find out how long it takes to go. Because not many people are able to spend 2 or 3 hours on a bus getting to a job and then making that same route back.
Yeah, we did look at that, and the average is between 30 to 45 minutes for them to commute.
To an employment center.
To wherever they're working. I mean, the commute times for people who live in Liberty City was about maybe 45 minutes, 35 to 45 minutes.
Also, the transportation orientation development, that's one of the things they wanted to look at, if they could shorten the time.
Security, right, yeah.
Corridor, and then they have to look at that.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I've done some interviews in Liberty City, and it seems like the biggest issue is with the buses is that they're not coming often enough. You know, it's like a schedule, or they don't keep their schedule.
Yeah,
And
they
then
don't have a really great
and then they have those like bus depots that they used to play chess. Like they were telling me the stories, and now they're like old. And did you guys see any of those? They're kind of gotten.
Miami.
They're smelly now. And I drove around just to see what they were talking about, and I did see, like, it was crazy. I mean, I can share with you guys the pictures I took, but it's, you know, this big, new, beautiful, gated high-rise next to these, like, dilapidated buildings. So it definitely, it's different to look at it on a map and look at the data versus talking to people and driving around, for sure.
Yeah, and we also heard that Miami-Dade County is looking at reducing bus service. And we weren't able to go further into where they're not necessarily doing that, but maybe that's something to sort of make sure this isn't the area that they're doing, and or this is the bill payer.
Yeah, it will be interesting with data collection to kind of just see how many people are waiting at the bus stops, because I found that some of them were very busy, and other ones there's no one there.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean that's
it almost
one
looks like there
reason why
were
they're
many.
not taking the bus.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, going from anywhere to anywhere here takes at least 2 hours.
Yeah.
We both have crazy schedules.
Additional historical facts, some right pieces of wisdom, or
Just looking a bit more into the innovative financing and not just formal banks into the area because of the information that they had with so many smaller micro businesses, to look into that and micro business development, other NGOs and other sectors that can help in smaller amounts. So the VA loans, I think, are a little bit too much actually for the businesses that do exist. It's the amounts do